Chapter 1 Monster Prehistory Section 1 The Primordial Cosmic Hush. The Multiverse. The universes in this multiverse are all connected on a world tree similar to that of the Yggdrasil of Norse mythology, whose name is the Stablo Mehricha. The multiverse consists of many universes, such as Thingia, the Thumpyverse, the Human World, the Prism Dimension, the Grapefruit Grove, and the Monster World, among others. These universes are born when the flowers from the tree are pollinated. The Thumpyverse and Thingia are the eldest of the aforementioned universes, and have also started to sprout some multiverse-bearing trees of their own from seedlings dropped from the Stablo Mehricha, as have some others as well. The Monster World would seem quite young when compared to those two, but comparatively to the Human World, it is very ancient. The Stablo Mehricha sometimes seeps a sap, which is known to us as amber, or also as the binding magic of the trees. When any being from one dimension of the trees goes into any others, it conforms to that dimension, such as we'll see with Prismatics, Rare Wubbox, Bill, Spirit, and Whizbang. In the beginning of the Monster World... What Monster World? There's nothing here yet. There is only silence here. This time in the 2B Monster World is called the Primordial Cosmic Hush, as it was primordial, cosmic, and silent. Then, all of a sudden, a Big Bang-like event known as the Big Clangor disrupts the hush, sending out a cacophony of sounds furiously, as well as some space dust, that fill the void cacophonously for eons. As a result of this event, 12 beings known as the Celestials are born, guardians of the elements. These 12 elements being, in no particular order, air, plant, earth, water, cold, fire, electricity, plasma, shadow, mech, crystal, and poison. These 12 Celestials, in the same order as their elements that they reign over, are Atmos, Blasum, Tort, Hornicle, Glacier, Furnos, Galvana, Plixie, Ludwig, Vamp, Syncopite, and Skaratar. These Celestials, incarnate forms of elemental energy, are the first inhabitants of the Monster World. The origins of the Celestials are all various and unique in their own ways. I cannot ensure that these are all in the correct order chronologically, except for the first. Furnos, Celestial of Fire and First Celestial, is said to have been forged in the living core of the Monster World, aka the epicenter of the Big Bang-like event. Furnos was then expelled from the world into the stars in a prehistoric eruption. Once settled in the sky, it roared to life, throwing off sparks and casting light down on the world below. Hornicle, Celestial of Water, is said to have been formed directly from that cacophony of sound. Yet throughout the clangor, a wave of harmony swelled, crested, and crashed upon the void, pulling into a placid sea of euphony and starlight, and the living ocean was born. Syncopite, Celestial of Crystal, is said to have been formed from when the very silence of the primordial cosmic hush grew so silent that it was compressed by its own weight and collapsed in on itself, forming a dense, luminous mass. The Syncopite splintered off from the mass, being a living megalith of crystal and rock, exploding and retracting, encapsulating the event for eternity. The rest of the mass formed the magical, time-warping diamonds which appear everywhere around the modern Monster World. Tort, Celestial of Earth, is said to have formed from when the cacophony of the cosmos grew so loud that it formed a carapace to shield itself. It's also said that Tort measures time for all eternity. Glacier, Celestial of Cold, is said to have first manifested amidst the confluence of ice crystals, gravity, and chill vibes. Glacier, along with its drums, marks the glacial passage of time. Plixie, Celestial of Plasma, is said to have formed from when the primordial cosmic hush was still silent. It oozed and flowed in concert with its own internal melody and the nascent rhythm of the universe. Blasum, Celestial of Plant, sprouted from the first cosmic dust sent out by the Big Clangor, burgeoning and eventually blooming. Vamp, Celestial of Mech, spent eons as a sentient, though incorporeal, mass of energy. It eventually decided to put itself together, quite literally, and constructed its own form out of random detritus scattered about the universe. The 4 other Celestials also came into existence around this time, but we do not yet have detailed descriptions of how. Each of these Celestials spread out among the New World and took up residence up among the stars, with each living within the metaphysical space of their own constellation. In this metaphysical state, they resembled compact, egg-like orbs. Connected to the specific areas of their origin and inspired by the constellation shapes about them, each was imbued with their own elemental power. Over time, the prehistoric cacophonic clangor echoing throughout the monster world subsided, and silence took over once more. After some time, the unmistakably deep, sonorous voices of the Colossals were heard. These Colossals, nameless, disembodied spirits of creation, were inspired to harness the power of creation to make the monster world a richer place. Although, nameless wouldn't be the correct term. They do have names, yes, but they are not pronounceable to us mortal humans. As such, a few of these Colossals have been given nicknames so that we may distinguish them from one another. The named Colossals that we know currently are Greenwich, Frigil, Zephyr, Hydrid, Solemn, Zaroi, Ahimsa, Lanista, and Valdi, as well as the Queen Colossal Dulcitea and the King Colossal, who is yet unnamed. These Colossals were amazed by the world that lay before them, specifically the Celestials' elemental affiliations. There was also something else that they saw too, the emptiness. A blank, and most importantly, silent, canvas for them to work with, to shape to their liking. The first task the Colossals faced was to teach the 12 Celestials to sing. Each Celestial was paired with a Colossal, and the 2 of them would collaborate on finding the best sound and physical form for the Celestial. Greenwich was paired with Lassume, Frigil was paired with Glacier, Zephyr was paired with Atmos, Hydrid was paired with Hornicle, and Solemn was paired with Tort. Each of these pairings, while they may have had disagreements, as all collaborations may, ended successfully, with each celestial spirit gaining a full body that was suited to their custom musical styling. And in return, the Celestials gave the Colossals an interest for their element, so Greenwich would now be known as the Plant Colossal and Hydrid would be known as the Water Colossal, or whatever element they were gifted. Next, the Colossals built a mysterious piece of clockwork for the Celestials upon which they could gather and sing in harmony with each other. This place, called Starhenge, as well as connecting the Celestials together, connected them both to their stars above and their elements below, as it was positioned halfway between the stars and the living core, from which it drew its power to stay levitating. After this great success, the Colossals wished to create a world full of harmonious singing monsters that could be combined of both the influences of nature and music. Now, I think that it's important to distinguish the difference between Celestials and Colossals, with there being some confusion and gray areas on the subject. While Celestials came first, Colossals are the more powerful of the two groups. Celestials are guardians who watch over monsters with their element, while Colossals are the more creatory, godlike beings who are more alien and unknown to us mortals, with their very names being unknown and able to confuse a well-learned individual. Colossals also taught the Celestials how to even make music in the first place, sort of creating the basis for what the entire world was to be. So, yeah, Colossals are the more powerful ones. Chapter 1. Section 2, Creation. When Colossals create, they join together in a song. It's a great song. It's the great song. The great song is a very powerful tool in the arsenal of the Colossals, which allows them to create whenever they join together in a song. When the Colossals are engaged in this act of creativity, the experience is often described as being guided by a spirit of creation. The spirit, known for being depicted as a kindly old being attuned to the power of nature, was thought to whisper ideas and inspirations to its creatorial compatriots. As well as this, it would provide a gentle backing track of humming to which one could work. This piece of imagery would go on to be so deeply inspirational to the Colossals that each had envisioned itself as a guardian over various islands or locations or elemental lands in the monster world, willing to sacrifice their own spirits to protect it if ever such an occasion were to arise. To test their abilities of creation, the Colossals went to a pocket dimension off of the Primordiality, the main dimension of the monster world. This place would act as a sandbox for the experimentation of their creative willpower. Their first experiment was with the animation of inanimate matter, to turn it into living beings. Statues of beings plucked directly from the Colossals' imaginations were planned at the Blueprint Workshop, carved out of bubblerite, and installed on the early Ethereal Island. A few statues can still be found in a special place called the Ethereal Meadow. Specific interactions with bubblerite in the pocket dimension led some of it to turn into crystallium, the first ever crystal. The Colossals used this crystal, specifically a plasmic form of it, to form structures or hold things together by forming lattices of arm-like strings holding onto each other in the shape of whatever it was they wanted to form. If exposed to a special process the Colossals pioneered called Life Formula, also known as the Spark of Life, the statues could turn from bubblerite into living, breathing monsters, such as the Primordial Monculus, or the true final product, the Naturals. Natural monsters are those monsters containing only the elements of air, plant, earth, water, cold, and fire. Using this method, the nascent world would be populated. Several of these statues did not go onto the animation stage, and were instead reused as bowls to hold precious gems. The Spark of Life itself was a very powerful tool in the Colossals' arsenal that let inanimate matter become animate via the imbuement of vitalizing energies. This power was later also found to be in the power set of the element of electricity, becoming the core identity of what that element even is. Once the Colossals were satisfied and done with testing their creativity, they once again turned their attention to the main dimension of the monster world, known as the Primordiality, using crystallium and bubblerite as the base upon which to form it. Yet one specific Colossal, named Zarwi, stayed behind, locking itself in by locking the pocket dimension off to interdimensional travel, so that it could continue to transform the sandbox into an island in its own right. It laid out blueprints over the whole of the island, and zapped crystallium into the perfect formations of trees, horns, and whatever else was needed upon what would one day become Ethereal Island. It also crafted an entire class of monster by itself to reside here, these being the Ethereal monsters. These monsters contain the elements of plasma, shadow, mech, crystal, and poison. Using what they had learned in the teaching of the Celestials, the Colossals joined together in a great song that shaped and powered their creative willpower. Building off of the still active and potent living core of fire, these Colossals drew power and energy directly from the multiversal tree, the Starhenge. Taking some of its sap, they infused the living core with crystallized amber and musical potential. Harnessing the power of the Starhenge, the Colossals established what was to be the crowning jewel of the monster world, the continent. This landmass sits in the direct center of the infinitely vast expanse of the living ocean, directly above the living core, and directly underneath of Starhenge. It was from the continent that Starhenge 2 got its power, what allowed it to stay levitating. The first element in this world was the element of fire, and from it, the rest of the natural elements were born. Because of this, it is regarded as the most powerful element of them all. As the natural elements came about, they each got lands of their own added to the continent, except for fire, which does not get its own land, but instead has a volcano leading into the living core of the monster world, which represents its quiet, guiding presence to the natural elements. Each elemental land of the continent had its very own crystals fashioned after the pocket dimension's own crystallium. The plant lands had Vigidian, the cold lands had Ferocium, the air lands had Skylight, the water lands had Aquanine, or Aquanine, and the earth lands had Stonix. Although there were no fire lands, there was still a fire-affiliated crystal, that being Pyrrhizite, which looked the most similar to crystallium in appearance, as if it had just been recolored from blue to orange. Through the combined efforts of the Colossals' great song, the first monsters came to be, and began to populate the monster world. Those of you who are familiar with the franchise might suspect that we jumped directly into the Dawn of Fire. But, before that, there's a much simpler time. A time before monsters first signed together in Unity. The Colossals, although directly forming monsters exactly as they had wanted, had a creative idea. They would create different beings and have them evolve over time into their preferred end goal, the thing that they had originally envisioned. In this time, over millions of years, monsters evolved, adapting to their environments, not yet unleashing their musical abilities. Several breeds of monsters who share each other's likeness had co-evolved together, giving rise to the first monster families. Pummels could swim without need of their planty membranes, and so could Fanglers. One such group even wished to touch the sun. The original common Canas, now known today as rare Canas, were very populous, more so than the today common cousin. And one particular peculiar breed decided to develop a different, non-lung way of breathing. Extraordinary! Over these millions of years, the Celestials went through their life cycle, being young, then being adult, then being elder, before finally turning into stone statues to then be reborn and restart the cycle. Chapter 2: The Dawn of Fire. Section 1: The Golden Age of the Monster World. The Dawn of Fire, when monsters decided to band together for the very first time. The continent was a vast landmass of unity between all monsters of all species, where young monsters could roam between the different elemental lands. Once matured enough, these young monsters could teleport over to the Outer Islands. The Outer Islands exist in an infinitely vast expanse over the living ocean, and are populated only by the correct, eligible monsters. Here, monsters found their forever home. The original Outer Islands were Space Island, a dense sphere of rock encircled by rings of stone, Cloud Island, a series of platforms made of clouds with paper birds flying all around, and Cave Island, sitting in a subterranean water pool situated in a cavern deep underground. The origins of the Outer Islands are still unknown. From the Celestials' divine perch of Starhenge, they watched over the monster world, guiding and protecting all who bore their elements. Although they usually stay as dormant eggs residing in their constellations, needing to be summoned downward by the powers of star charts and cosmic dice in tandem with the observatory, mysterious objects and structures connected to the celestial powers of Starhenge. Only one celestial could be summoned per month, as there was only one of their constellations shining overhead per month. Speaking of, Thrumbles, long-necked monsters who enjoyed stargazing, took it up upon themselves to name the constellations of the elements. Poisons was called Poison's Mark, Shadows was called Shadowed Glare, Earth's was called Earthing Ellipse, Plasma's was called Plasmic Ooze, Air's was called Weathered Winds, Water's was called Ocean's Tears, Fire's was called Core Flame, Cold's was called Frozen Form, Plants was called Growing Green, Crystals was called Crystalline Crop, Mechs was called Metal Gears, and Electricities was called Immortal Jolt. Each land of the continent also had special structures built by the Colossals that enhanced everyday life. The plant lands had a teleporter that provided access to the Outer Islands, as well as a trading post where anyone could sell or buy anything to or from anyone, even across multiversal distances. The Coldlands had a wonderful cave system in its high-peaked mountain range that was known as the Wonder Mine, as wonderful things could be found within. The Airlands had a skyport providing access to the sky ship that shipped goods produced on the continent all over the monster world. The Waterlands had a wishing well that could, for a fee of coins, produce many wonderful treasures. And the Earthlands had a deconstructor, a miniature volcano that could break down any item into both its fundamental pieces and essences. Technology was booming during this age, so much so that it was referred to as the Golden Age of the monster world. Thanks to the Colossals, the monsters had developed economic markets and trade relations with distant lands. The Colossals had also gifted the monsters with structures for breeding and incubating monster eggs, structures for creating food, clothes, and toys, and castles to house them all. The Colossals also made a structure for unlocking the evolutionary potential of monsters, known as the Crucible. However, it was not yet given to the monsters, being stored in the higher plane. Discovery and adventure were high too, as they decided to claim a sea leviathan with a rock on its back as an island to sing and celebrate doing so upon. This place was called Party Island. Hey, if you've made it this far into the video, you might really like my style of content, so please at least consider subscribing. Thanks!